Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Betsy Woodruff. I'm a reporter with Slate, and I'm here with Alexis Levinson. We're going to be talking about national politics and other really exciting things for a while. This is the Woodruff and Strauss show on Blogging Heads, and Alexis is our guest today, which is very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a reporter at Roll Call. I cover mostly campaigns and Senate races and House races and a little bit of presidential stuff.
Cool. The first thing we wanted to talk about is a kind of exciting moment on Capitol Hill a couple days ago. It's a little bit. I don't know that this necessarily made major national news. This obviously got national coverage, but it seemed like it was more sort of a inside baseball story. But I think it has pretty major national implications. What happened was there was a piece of legislation that was going to ban abortion after 20 weeks in the House. Obviously, President Obama would, without any doubt, without any delay, veto that legislation if it made it to his desk. But the House wanted to have a vote on it because yesterday was the day of the March for Life, the anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision, an important day in the pro-life calendar. And they wanted to be able to have this vote, and it's obviously symbolic, but the symbolism to pro-life activists and to the Republican base is very important. However, the night before the vote was supposed to happen, something like, 8 p.m., news broke that House leadership was going to cancel the vote, and it wasn't happening, which I remember seeing that on Twitter, just being, really baffled and surprised. What did you make of that? What was your, I don't know, did you have an immediate reaction? Where were you when the House pulled the 20-week abortion vote?
I mean, I think part of it was just, I feel like we've had these kind of horrible, not messaging problems, but the GOP leadership has had this happen, I feel like, multiple times in the past couple of years. They keep having these bills where, we think everything's going okay, and at the last minute it's like, oh, no, we don't know the votes, we can't do this, we're changing our minds. And, I think I sort of had the idea that, with the new Congress, they were going to maybe iron this out. They have such a big majority. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of reason not to. And it's just it's the same thing that happened the last time. And every time they do it, I just can't quite get my head around how they didn't see this coming.
Yeah, seriously.
Mostly, I mean, this time I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it, but usually even reporters see it coming.
I wasn't even paying that much attention to it because I thought it was going to be such an easy vote.
Right. Yeah. But then there's a National Journal story where they did the TikTok of what exactly happened. And apparently these were concerns brought up at the House retreat or the joint GOP retreat, which was 2 weeks ago now, I think. Mm-hmm. So I don't quite know how they didn't really register.
Is this something that happened when Democrats were in House leadership? Because I wasn't covering the Hill then. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
But it seems like just a really persistent problem for House Republicans that them having to pull votes at the last minute, or having all these nail biter votes, or things that you would expect them to be able to pass without that much stress end up just blowing up at the last second. So
I still remember the Plan B thing. It was Christmas Eve, or right before Christmas, and they're all in this meeting, and we're waiting for them to come out and say, "Oh, we have the votes," and then Alan West walks out and it's just Merry Christmas, and they leave. And we're whoa, this just unraveled at 11 o'clock at night, and it seems like they need to figure out something to do about that, to not have this keep happening.
Do you think the problem is that House leadership isn't good at their jobs, or do you think the problem is that there's almost a systemic issue with the Republican caucus, that it's so big and divided and unwieldy that it's going to be difficult to get them all to be on board with anything major, and that there's kind of a necessary level of stress when you have a caucus of that size? Hey, I think you're freezing up a little bit. Are you there?
I think it maybe the second one. I mean, there are obviously a lot of shoot. Okay, I think we're both back.
Okay.
You're back on my screen. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, good.
I think they're the obvious divisions of sort of the people who voted against this Boehner for speaker the first day, and those are the ones I think people focus on. But I think when you have, now that they have a much bigger majority, I think they're starting to see there are some new factions coming up in there, and this time a lot of them seem to be on social issues, and a lot of the divide seems to be between women and men.
Yeah, and what struck me this time too is I feel like typically you have sort of your anti-Boehner, Tea Party, very conservative insurgents, right? And I think everyone who voted against Boehner as speaker was a man. I think all the women in the Republican caucus voted for Boehner for speaker. And it's typically, kind of these dudes who are rabble-rousing and are mad at leadership and want to do their own thing and, are going rogue. But what struck me this time was that it seems like it's mostly women. And it's, that's not something that typically happens with House Republicans. You don't typically have groups of women saying, we're putting our foot down, we don't like this legislation, you're not getting it passed, figure it out. So that, it seemed like there was almost a revolt of the moderates in the last 2 weeks.
Well, and Renee Elmers is also, she's not someone you think of as particularly divided from leadership at all.
No, she's close with leadership.
She was one of the ones who, she dropped her name off the bill. I think she may even have a leadership position of some, lower down variety. So, that's not who you expect to usually be doing the, we're going to defy leadership in this really public and somewhat embarrassing way.
Right, yeah, you wouldn't expect her to.
So, that to me was really surprising. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely, and just very weird. So I wonder if that's something, do you think we're going to see more of that? Like more of this kind of sort of moderates rearing their heads in coming months? I
kind of feel like social issues or like abortion in particular is sort of this distinct issue just because Republicans have had, especially in the past 4 years, Republicans have had however you feel about the issue, Republicans have had sort of a big messaging problem on this subject. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch were the right people to be delivering the message they delivered. And I think this issue then gets so murky for them because they just can't seem to get it right. And it's something that Democrats have capitalized on so well in in the past few elections. And I think it maybe causes divisions within the party that wouldn't necessarily be there for, say, some tax bill. I think this may be its own, anything involving rape seems to be its own thing within the Republican Party, I think.
That's interesting. That makes sense. We talked a little bit earlier about the possibility of Elmers getting primaried.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, we were hearing rumors about that last year, or not last year, but end of last year that there was going to be a more serious primary challenger to her this year because she is one of the ones who said she supports kind of the Senate version of comprehensive immigration reform she was more in line with the Senate immigration overhaul bill than a lot of members of her party wanted her to be. And she's in a conservative district, and I think I would assume this just exacerbates it. I mean, she seems to have, I know it was both she and Jackie Walorski who took their names off as co-sponsors of the bill at the last minute, but it seems like it's coming down a lot harder on her. And I think part of that is she kind of has this history of kind of pissing off some of the more conservative factions of the party. And I wonder if this is just going to exacerbate that.
It's also interesting going back to the messaging problem of Republicans sometimes having trouble talking about abortion without putting their foot in their mouths. It's interesting that this criticism is coming from Renee Elmers, because wasn't she the one who a couple of months ago gave sort of a closed-door speech about how the GOP needed to reach out to women by using fewer charts and talking about how women want more money so they can spend it on their grocery bill, and just giving this sounded like reaching out to women as if it was you're reaching out to a 1950s housewives. And that was, I remember that being very embarrassing for her, sort of a very awkward, clumsy moment. So it's always interesting, when you have Republicans saying, well, someone's going to put their foot in their mouth. Someone's going to say something really stupid. Typically, that's not a problem that's unique to the conservative grassroots of the Tea Party. That's obviously something that they have. But you talk about Renee Elmer's, saying that Republicans shouldn't use charts because women don't like charts. The Steve Scalise catastrophe. It's interesting that there within the Republican ideological spectrum, no one really seems immune to stuff like this.
Yeah, I've actually always been struck by last Congress, I guess, when Democrats had a majority in the Senate, Republicans had a majority in the House, just how much it's not like Democrats have never someone's never put their foot in their mouth, but it's in the political sphere. I've always been struck by how much more in Congress, in the Capitol, Democrats have been able to sort of like tighten their message up and you don't see a lot of people spouting off as much. Whereas in the Republican Party, I think it's safe to say there are a lot of divisions in the Democratic Party too, with, Elizabeth Warren and all these different wings, but somehow they seem to just kind of keep it internal and keep it together. And Republicans get very vocal when there are these disputes.
Yeah, it's like Republicans aren't good at keeping it in the family the way Democrats are.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe that's better, for, I guess if you're vocal about it, you maybe get something to happen about it. But there seems to be a difference in how they handle these divisions. Yeah. And there seems to be less embarrassment sometimes for Democratic leadership, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Republicans in the House who are conservative House Republicans have had better success moving House leadership their direction than progressive House Democrats have. So yeah, I wonder like to what extent the waving their arms over their head caucus has seen payoff. I don't know. It's interesting. It's also interesting how, like, on the Democratic side, I feel like the number one person for saying stupid things and being a political liability was W. Wasserman Schultz, right? Like, talking about how Scott Walker is giving the back of his hand to women.
Yeah. So it really, their leadership on the Democratic side. And because I think Nancy Pelosi's had a couple, too, that have caused consternation.
But nothing super major, right? Like, there's something about, pass the bill so we can read it. But
Bruce Braley was like the poster child this cycle for stupid remarks, but those were not, Democratic messaging remarks. Those were just him being
so painful.
So painful. Yeah.
Did you go cover that race at all?
I did, yeah. I was out for the fair. So okay. I saw it. I didn't see his staff at that point. There'd been already the chicken remark and the Grassley remark or not the chicken remark, the chicken lawsuit or whatever. And his staff had him on such a tight leash. I mean, he barely talked to anyone because I think they were so terrified that he was going to just run his mouth off again. I mean, he was on a schedule and he was there for a couple hours and he made his beelines to exactly where he needed to be. He talked to exactly who he needed to talk to. And then they were like, okay, we're leaving for lunch. We'll be back in a couple hours. We were like, okay. Aren't you supposed to talk to people? But they were not going to let him do anything he wasn't supposed to do. Amazing. Which was probably smart in retrospect.
Yeah, no kidding.
So,
gotta do what you gotta do. Going back to the possibility of an Elmer's primary, have any names been floated as someone who'd run against her?
My guess is one of my colleagues is going to put a story up about this in the next few hours, but off the top of my head, I haven't been super focused on it, so I don't know. But
interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, it's going to be interesting to see because it seems like after the midterms, a lot of the conservative outside groups who spend a lot on primarying incumbents were really unsuccessful. Failure after failure. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if in the 2016 cycle they focus more on House races. 'Cause it seems like those are cheaper, a little easier to catch people off guard. Mm-hmm. They actually had some significant House primary victories in 2014. And I think also most of the senators that are up are running in purple or blue states where you're not going to get somebody more conservative who could actually win in a general.
Yeah, I mean, you're not, this is not really the cycle for primary challenges on the right. I guess, Harry Reid's happy place would be if they tried to do it in Nevada against him, I think.
Yeah, totally.
If he could get another Sharon Angle, he'd be psyched. But there's just not a lot of offensive options for Republicans. And I mean, are you really going to challenge Pat Toomey? I mean, they could, and he's certainly not, he has taken some more moderate positions, but he was also the president of the Club for Growth, and I would assume they're going to come in and back him. So
yeah, no kidding.
It'd be very, very newsy if they decided not to.
And also, you're not going to get a Chris McDaniel type candidate who'd be remotely competitive in Pennsylvania.
Not at all. Same with Wisconsin, especially in a presidential year. They're both, they're very much swing states, but they're also really purple and potentially trending blue in a presidential year swing states.
Totally, yeah. And that's so interesting how you have states that go from like being purple-ish to like Democratic in presidential elections.
No, it really is.
So,
and
speaking of, I feel like Iowa is almost becoming one of those states, right?
I want to say that, and then Republicans completely swept in, and I know we're talking about presidential years, but there's just no, I mean, that's a swing state, a purple state in any year, and they've always had sort of Tom Harkin as a Democrat and Chuck Grassley as a Republican as their senators, and they used to have sort of an evenly divided House caucus. And now there's one House member, or there's one Democrat left in their congressional delegation, and everyone else is gone. And they have the governorship, they have the state House. I think the only thing they don't have in Iowa right now is the state Senate. So I just can't tell if we see that swing back in a presidential year, or if in a presidential year it's just like, nope, we're moving Republican. And
also in the state Senate, I think Democrats only have it by 2 or 3 seats. Yeah, like it's not a big majority at all.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing. It's weird that like Iowa is basically as Republican as Alabama, or Louisiana in terms of what its congressional delegation and what its state government looks like.
No, it really is, because you don't think of it that way. And I don't know. I mean, I was covering that race starting in, I guess, April. And I was like, oh, whatever. Like, this isn't going to be a big race. Braley's probably going to win. This is a Democratic race. They'll sort it out. And it just didn't turn out like that at all. And she pulled everyone along with her. Joni Ernst did. Like, she was just such a strong candidate that, I mean, I think it's the first district where it's Rod Blum now is the congressman. Yeah. I don't think anyone expected him to win. That was Braley's seat. That's a really Democratic seat.
It's a big deal. It's really remarkable. Well, you wanna talk more about Senate races then?
Yeah, sure.
2016. Are there a couple that you're most excited about, or you think are going to be most interesting?
I think Florida will be a lot of fun. Definitely. Just part of that is going to be whether Rubio runs or not, because he said he's only going to run for president. If he runs for president, he'll only run for president. If he runs for Senate, he'll only run for Senate. And so part of it is just waiting to see what he does. But it's such a big state, and there's so much money, and just, there's so many. I was writing up, who could run for these seats, and there's so many names that people are listing, and I think that one's going to be fun. But I think we'd also talked about how California is going to be a really interesting one, mostly in the primary, because you already have it shaping up. Kamala Harris, who's the Attorney General, has said she's running, and people are starting to kind of line up behind her. But then the former LA mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, is also thinking about running, and that sets up all these really interesting geographical things. And he's Hispanic, she's Black. Like, you have a lot of kind of, I guess, Democratic Party groups or traditional constituencies of the Democratic Party suddenly matching up against each other, potentially. I think that would be an awesome race if he actually gets in. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that Tom Steyer, who is an environmentalist, billionaire mega donor, didn't he just say he's specifically not running in California? Yeah. Yesterday he said he's not going to run, which is also a little sad because, I would have loved to watch that, but... I know, it's so disappointing. Yeah. I root for the drama. Yeah, totally. 100%. 100%. Which is why we have to root for Rubio running for president. Absolutely. So without a doubt.
Do you think Republicans could win a Senate seat in Florida in a presidential year?
I think so. They have a much better bench in the state than Democrats do. I mean, when you talk about who Democrats are looking at, I've heard Patrick Murphy, who's a sophomore House Democrat, and even Gwen Graham, who was sworn in like 3 weeks ago. And, you know, she has a big family name. She's the daughter of a really popular former governor. But that's not, you know, necessarily who you want to be looking at for a really, really big state where someone... It's the same. One of my colleagues wrote a piece about this with California, that it's when you have such a big state as Florida or California, it's really hard for a House member to run for statewide office because it's hard for them to have, with so many media markets and so many of them so expensive, it's really hard for them to have found sort of a statewide audience as opposed to just their district. So that's not necessarily the position I think you want to be in as a Democrat in Florida, of having kind of 2 House members as your top people and then some mayors. Whereas Republicans have a lot of statewide offices. I mean, pretty much all the statewide offices, I think, in Florida. They have the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor and former Lieutenant Governor and state house, you know, state speaker. And there are a lot of people with a lot more Republicans with bigger profiles, I think, than...
I feel like Florida and Iowa are both states where the state government and the percentage of the state that Republicans control doesn't really reflect the electorate, right? Because Florida's voted for the Democratic presidential candidate. Well, it voted for Obama twice. It seems to be increasingly blue. It has a really large Hispanic population. Like, I feel like Florida should kind of be a blue state, or at least it should be more competitive. But yeah, like the state government's run by Republicans. Statewide offices are held by Republicans. Their bench is really muscular. So I think that's probably to the credit of the Florida Republican Party, right?
Yeah, you know, it's not something I follow closely enough to say that, but yeah, it's certainly, they've had a lot of success statewide, at least, so, or in their state government. Yeah,
no kidding. And the fact that Rick Scott got reelected.
Yeah, that alone.
It's impressive.
It is impressive because he had like the worst popularity numbers of any governor, I think, out there for a while. I mean, he's not a particularly well-liked guy. I mean, I guess either was Charlie Crist, but yeah.
I wish somebody would write sort of like a version of Game Change about the Florida governor's race, because
I would love to read that.
Totally. Because everything about it was ridiculous. You know?
The fan was insane.
Ridiculous. Amazing.
I don't understand how that
happened. Just amazing. Yeah, I want somebody to write that book.
I would love that.
That's funny. What do you think about, and just something we'd talked earlier before, is senators who might be leaving the Senate to run for governor? Mm-hmm. Possibly, definitely Vitter in Louisiana?
Yeah, he has an exploratory committee, so as definite as anyone is with an exploratory committee. Yeah. I think he certainly thinks he's going to run, and he's, as far as I know, pretty much the front runner. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a lot of people starting to look at his seat if he's gone or if he's leaving. And he might actually get to appoint his own successor until the election, because that race will be in 2015, I believe.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so whoever, I hope I'm not saying that wrong, but I'm pretty sure his race would be in 2015, and then he would be sworn in at the beginning of 2016, and he could appoint his successor until the end of his term, and then have a special election. Huh. So he could actually end up being the guy who's like, I am handpicking the guy who's coming after me, and we're good.
Not a bad way to go.
Probably not. Hold on to your legacy. But yeah, I mean, John.
And that's going to be a lock for Republicans, right? In 2016.
So I saw polling yesterday. There's I think he's the state treasurer, John Kennedy, did a lot of polling for both that race and the Senate race, and he seems to be looking at a lot of possibilities in Louisiana. And Landrieu and Vitter were the 2 top names. And I think, I assume at this point a lot of that has to do with name recognition. Mm-hmm. It's not clear to me that Landrieu would be thinking she wants to go through another election in Louisiana after last time. But her name has certainly been put out there, and we'll see. I think that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, for sure.
And that has, like, all the, I mean, Vitter and Jindal hate each other, and Jindal's going to run for president. And, you know, no one in Louisiana likes Jindal, apparently. And it's just, like, that is Louisiana politics, I think, bat above their weight class for interest and
definitely, yeah.
intrigue.
Totally, for sure. It's interesting how much 2016 prep Jindal's been doing, like how very public he's been. Going to Israel, I think he recently went to the UK, tweeting mean things about Obama during State of the Union.
Yeah, I mean, he's been everywhere, but I feel like he's been struggling with this for years now. He just can't quite seem to break through somehow. Like, I don't know, because I've actually found him sort of compelling when I've seen him speak. He does speak very fast, which maybe makes me more interested than your but, like, I don't know. He seems to struggle to kind of get any kind of grip on support the way some of these other people just sort of have launched in. And, like, Rand Paul has his built-in support, and Ted Cruz has his built-in support. And I'm not sure Bobby Jindal has a lot of that built-in support.
I feel like he doesn't have an automatic base. And, like, he'd sort of be competing with Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum for religious voters. I don't think there's really an enormous Catholic presence in most early state Republican primaries.
Yeah,
that's not really a sector that he could try to do well in. I think the trouble for him is just going to be explaining what he has to offer that other candidates don't. I feel like basically any major advantage he has, whether you're talking about school choice, education stuff, you know, Jeb Bush has more experience on that, or you're talking about defense stuff. Jindal is not going to be a defense guy, or he's not going to be more compelling on that than any other candidate. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, like, what strategy he takes to sort of distinguish himself in the next couple months. Because we're expecting people to start announcing if they're running in March through June, maybe.
I think you have to at this point. I mean, with Jeb out there, I think certainly Christie has to come out soon, and Romney probably has to come out pretty soon if he's doing it. Mm-hmm. And once they come out, I feel like the field starts taking shape. I mean, most of them are just doing it without formally announcing. We all know Rand Paul wants it. We all know Ted Cruz wants it. And, you know, everyone's going to Iowa this weekend. But, you know, I think eventually people are going to have to start coming out and being like, yeah, for real, I'm doing it. I'm not just tiptoeing around this and pretending, so you'll pay attention to me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. People you're going to have to stop being so coy.
Yeah. Well, because they compete for a lot of the same territory, a lot of them. I mean, you know, Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum, I feel like play in a pretty similar ring, though it seems like Santorum is maybe trying to expand his, his persona, I guess, as a candidate. But, you know, they overlap a fair bit. And I think you have to start staking your claim to, I'm running and you need to support me now, instead of the other guy who you also like but hasn't announced yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of 2016 and preparation for presidential bids, it seems like an emerging power broker. I hate that term. It's such an annoying term.
I do too, but
it's really bad. But I can't think of a good synonym right now. It seems like an emerging broker of power is Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa. So, any thoughts on State of the Union and sort of her moment in the sun, her debut as a national political figure?
I mean, I actually sort of felt like the fact that she got chosen for State of the Union was a bigger deal than whatever she said in her speech. Because people seemed sort of like, nah, she gave a speech. At least it was better than, say, Rubio or Jindal. Since that speech has been sort of almost cursed in the past, it seemed like. But yeah, I mean, she said she won't endorse in the primary, but she's, you know, making all the moves to make herself be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like there hasn't been...
in when they start showing up. Harkin always had this stake.
Hang on 1 second.
Did we just cut out?
Yeah. You're going to start again with talking about Harkin's steak fry?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so always had this steak fry every year, which was this annual, it was a big event, it was a big fundraiser for him, and like every Democrat who was thinking of running for office would show up. And it was this big meet and greet for voters and for Democratic candidates, and it was a big, it was a big event. Everyone showed up, Clinton showed up, etc. And with him gone, Joni Ernst started her own version of the steak fry, which is, of course, called the roast and ride, because, she's into her motorcycles, and so she's going to do that. And I think even if she doesn't endorse, that puts her in like this pretty prominent position as far as kind of at least coordinating some of the 2016 mayhem.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't know.
And she can always endorse in 2020 or 2024,
Right.
It can make sense.
And I mean, yeah. I had people, when I actually wrote about this earlier in the week, I had people say, in 4 years and, or I guess in 6 years and 10 years, she's set up to be like a really strong vice presidential pick, depending if she wants that, if she sticks around.
That's a good point. That's interesting. It's the State of the Union response. I did a piece earlier this week about women who've given the State of the Union responses. And what you said earlier, I think, is really important. Like, the vast majority of State of the Union responses are either they're a disaster or they're just totally forgettable and they're the most boring thing you've heard in your entire life. I listened to Christine Todd Whitman's from during the Clinton presidency. I forget what year, and it was just like it sounded almost exactly like a speech that a Republican responder could have given today, and it was so boring. Like, not a bad speech, but just like the actual process of giving a State of the Union response, like those speeches themselves are just they're not fun to listen to. They're not particularly interesting. They don't really break news. You don't learn much that's new about the responder. So it's interesting that the most important thing there is just the fact that it gives the National Party a chance to signal, hey, we like this person, and so we're going to give them a really big platform, rather than them actually making an important point.
Well, and the optics are always so terrible, too, because you come out, like, the past 2 years, I was in the House chamber when Obama gave his speech, and, like, whatever you think of what he's saying, that is a really energized, excited room with people, like, standing up and clapping, and Rosa DeLauro, is, like, punching the air sometimes, and it's, there's a serious atmosphere there, and then you cut to a Republican alone in a room on white walls, delivering a speech that they wrote beforehand, so like really has nothing to do with the speech that Obama just gave.
Yeah, it's
the energy just completely goes away. It completely drains out.
I mean, it's hard to imagine.
It's hard to compete.
Totally, yeah. And I can't imagine that most people at home watching State of the Union are like, well, I just spent an hour listening to a speech. I can't wait to spend another half hour listening to another speech. Oh boy, buckle up. Like, I don't know.
I think most people don't stick around for the full hour of the actual State of the Union itself. So
right. Yeah. I'd be interested in seeing data on like how many people want, like sort of a chart of what happens to viewership over the course of the State of the Union speech. I imagine like the first 5 minutes has exponentially larger viewership than anything after that. I could be wrong.
And then maybe like the last 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the last 5 or 10 minutes of Obama's speech this year was the strongest. And so I wonder if they were thinking like, oh, more people tune in at the end when their regularly scheduled programs are coming on or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. Surprise! State of the Union. Haha. So much for watching Burn Notice. You sucker. That's good. Cool. Well, this was really good. I'm glad we did this.